We're back again. It's Thursday again. You know, like this happens every once in a while. It becomes Thursday, and then I show up because I'm an idiot. I'm an idiot who screams at a void for 2 hours, but at least we have other people to enjoy the void with us. Hello to the raiders who came by via Dio the Yarn Dragon, otherwise known as Dio the Yarn Dragon. Thursday is weird, and it does feel like it happens every week. Hey, Princess Breeze. Oh, okay. So we've got a hot take starting right away, which I'm pleased to see. Weirdness coming in at 10 months as well. So I guess we're gonna start. I did ask if there were any hot takes that people had, and it feels like a it feels like a day for hot takes, but also just general stuff. And so let's kind of get started right away. Let's pull it up here because I do have that capability. Oh no, featured chat doesn't show up those things, so I'm just gonna have to copy and paste it and add it in as a custom message because subtexts they don't let you feature for whatever weird reason. So Kung Fu Fenders throws in with rules needs to be hit with a hammer and sharp focused on user experience as well as narrative. Fuck all simulationism if it gets in the way of fun and easy use. Is this a hot take? On the hot take scale, I'd rate this if from a 1, which is a extremely cold take, 5 being a lukewarm take, and a 10 being a muy caliente take. I'm gonna pull this out there and say that that this already happens in a lot of RPGs. So I'd say that this is a good take, but I'm not sure if this is like super hot. To put it bluntly, the rule system that you use for a role-playing game needs to fit the user experience that players want to have and the narrative that it's trying to put forward. And the rules do affect the narrative, and vice versa. The idea that in D&D, when you're attacking and rolling and stuff like that, the way that the dice are being rolled and the order in which dice are being rolled and the way that characters progress and all that builds into the narrative in much the same way as in Pathfinder or other games of the D&D-esque sort. But point buy games are a bit different because they tend to involve more about individual character progression as opposed to just leveling up. So that's one very brief example, but absolutely rules do need to be smashed on not only the narrative stone but also the user experience stone, because as much as your narrative is important, it also kind of matters as to how does it feel to play. People who enjoy simulations want perhaps more complex rule systems, and that doesn't necessarily make them wrong, but it is important to note that the more you simulate, the more complex it gets, and the more complex it gets, you'll start losing people as that complexity becomes less fun to deal with. So it does happen. But yeah, that's a decent take. So I'm not going to say that it's not like super spicy, but it is a decent take. Who'd win in a fight? Arresta, she is now or Ray as a starting character. Also, how am I? I'm doing well because it's Thursday, and that means that my week's coming close to an end. I get to look forward to Punchy tomorrow, which is like the announcement of the weekend for me, which is always great. And the weather is really nice. So I get to put up with that as well. In terms of Arresta versus Ray, Ray is a starting character versus Arresta as she is now. As Liz pointed out, Kate knows the rules of Exalted 3rd Edition way better than when Liz started out with Ray, so that also makes quite a bit of a difference. Otherwise, you can't necessarily count Ray out. Remember that Arresta started as a deliberately weakened character alongside the other two PCs because they started at Essence 1, which for Dragon-Blooded is weaker than your starting Solar character. They've only really gone past that initial weakness for about 7 sessions. And Solars are on average stronger than Dragon Bloods, assuming all things are the same. So I think it would actually be Ray if they were both played to their utmost, but I'd have to go back and look at Ray's original sheet. It's tough. So that's there. I have to say hi, of course, Luke, hi, Rock Pants, Cassie Mess is here, Requiem, Shiranosho, Sklardicus Super. Hot is indeed true. I'd love to hear any hot takes from Sklardicus today. So here's a hot take that's being posed as a question. So we'll see how this goes. A lot of RPGs have very convoluted systems that scare beginners away. I would say that a lot of RPGs are not designed for beginners. And that's okay. Remember that most people don't actually start role-playing using a dedicated system. They do it on their own. When I was a child, my sister and I used to call these pretending games. And it was just quite literally people pretending to be other people. If you've ever pretended to be somebody else, you have role-played. If you've ever engaged in that make-believe play as a child, you role-played. So we don't learn with established systems. We learn on our own. We figure that out on our own first. I would definitely argue that a lot of RPGs have convoluted systems that definitely scare beginners away, and that's kind of by design. It's kind of like if I said, do you want to play a video game? And you'd never played a video game before in your entire life, and you said yes. If I gave you League of Legends, or if I gave you Tetris, which one of them do you think is going to be the one that's going to be more likely to graduate you into video games? League of Legends is a game with a learning cliff. It's extremely complicated. It's extremely intensely strategic. It's also Twitch based in some ways, and you have to deal with 9 other people on your team who may or may not be people you know. Whereas Tetris is a more controlled, relaxed experience with relatively simple rules. You're more likely to get into video games through Tetris than you are through League of Legends, or even games like Fortnite. Remember that some video games were designed to teach you about how to use computers. Solitaire was designed to teach you about clicking and dragging and double clicking. Minesweeper was designed to teach you how to use the right mouse button. These are games that are intended to graduate you into more complicated things. So yes, definitely, there are RPGs out there that are absolutely ones that I would not recommend for beginners. I would not take a 6-year-old and dump the Exalted 3rd Edition core on the table in front of them and say, read up, punk. Absolutely not. But I do think that once somebody can get the hang of role-playing and understanding what it is to play in the context of a rules-based system, they can graduate to other systems. So that does happen. That does happen. Yeah, I've heard, Cassie, that Essence is using arrays. I don't think that's necessarily a point against it, and I think they do provide point by as alternate rules if you really want. But I don't think arrays are so bad, especially because they're trying to simplify things. We'll see what happens when it actually comes out. If Ray won the fight, she would need to hook up the rest afterwards. This is her MO with Dragon Bloods. This is very true. This is extremely true. Give a beginner Europa Universalis if you're really cruel. Yeah, but at least it's not. At least it's turn-based. It's still pretty rough. I mean, I also think that sometimes we underestimate ourselves. When I was a kid, I was learning to play the original Civilization, which is a very complicated game, and I was learning to play it when I was very young. So, you know, it is possible. Princess Breeze shouting at Dio, which is fine. You love arrays, they're more comfortable than point by. I think it kind of depends. I like being able to customize. I don't necessarily need my customization to be quite so granular. So, and I'd love to know what array versus point by means in this context, because I'm not absolutely sure. The definition of those words can be kind of muddled, and so I'd really want to find out exactly what goes on. So Sklardicus points out, that's a great point about each of our first RPGs. They're just the pretending games we played as kids or beyond. I've played some more mechanical RPGs that claim to be beginner RPGs, like Ryutama 2, but it still assumes a bit comfort with role-playing and pretending, for one. Unfortunately, this is all role-playing games kind of have that learning curve. Games with systems tend to also remember that you have to not just be able to apply the systems, you also have to be able to apply your imagination and be able to express yourself. There's actually a lot of different skill sets that go into creating a role-playing game experience. It's not just storytelling, it's not just rolling dice, it's not just adjudicating rules, it's not just discovering your character, it's not just strategizing about what comes next, it's not just about interpersonal skills and being able to get along with other people, it's all of those things and more all put together. So there is a learning curve, and even people who've been doing it for a very, very long time, like I have, and like I imagine a lot of you have, we still find ways that we can improve and get better at it. There's also the idea that not very many people who roleplay necessarily use specific practice. There is a school of thought that in order to truly master a skill, you have to specifically practice individual elements of that skill as you go forward. Such as, this game I'm really going to focus on adjudicating the rules properly, and I'm going to take note of when I adjudicate rules and how I do it and how I could do it better and what I've done right and what I've done wrong. But then the next game I'm really going to focus on making sure that I'm involving everybody in the group, and then you kind of have to specifically focus and try and retry on that one thing to try to get it through. So it's kind of a question there, but that is true. So let's see here. Crosshair pulls in a lukewarm take. Players as a group saying no to the plot hook / big bad / catastrophe the game lead puts forward is fine to do. Okay, this is closer to a hot take, because there are elements of this statement that I absolutely agree with, and there's some that I don't. The idea that players don't have to buy into the hook that the game lead, as the Crosshair is putting it, the idea, of course, being that we're figuring out whether or not we want to continue using nomenclature such as game master and what it implies versus storyteller, game lead, guide, all kinds of other ones that are being put out there. Players are allowed to express themselves and do what they want, and if a game lead's plot is going to go nowhere, then it's often up to the players to kind of nudge the game away from that direction. But I don't always agree with the idea that if players reject a plot hook, that's okay. Because there are times where players will reject plot hooks not for any particularly good reason. This is especially true of players who are less experienced, who just kind of, you put them in a sandbox and all they want to do is mess with the sandbox. This is kind of akin to somebody booting up a game like Red Dead Redemption or Grand Theft Auto, and instead of trying to do any of the missions, all they want to do is run around and beat pedestrians up and steal cars and run pedestrians over. This can be a lot of fun. This can absolutely be a lot of fun for you to play the game in your own way. And a lot of people, when confronted with a sandbox, instantly start to appreciate the freedom that they have. But freedom doesn't necessarily make for good stories, which is why games like Red Dead Redemption and Grand Theft Auto have stories, have missions, have narratives for you to progress through, so that you're not just running around in a sandbox. If players have decided that they do not wish to follow along with the hooks that are being presented by the storyteller, they're risking ignoring a player at the table who is the storyteller. And that's not necessarily fair, because the storyteller is trying to guide players through a narrative experience. And if players have decided as a one that they do not want to have that narrative experience, then it is possible that they're actually being overtly selfish, or deliberately obtuse, or that the players are have failed to communicate the kind of game that they want to play to the storyteller. Now, I can just as easily put the blame on the storyteller and say that if they've come up with a plot line that the players don't want to do and they ignore it, that's also legitimate if they are not communicating adequately what kind of game they want to put forward. If I'm playing a high fantasy, lighthearted game, and then the storyteller immediately comes up with a character who's just like dark and brooding, and it's just political intrigue that they're interested in, and I'm like, this isn't the game I want to deal with. I don't care about this person. I'm leaving the castle now, and I'm going to go over to the dungeon. Bye! Like, that's okay. That I can understand as an action that somebody might want to take and be like, okay, that makes sense. But it isn't always the storyteller's fault. So this is a hot take, which I believe is it fits in that hot take kind of atmosphere that I love to see, because I think a lot of it is actually something that is true. I don't think that players necessarily have to go along with every dangling hook or big bad that gets presented, especially if the storyteller has made a mistake, because the storyteller can make mistakes. The idea of emotional whiplash, the idea of ignoring the hopes and goals of player characters in favor of just the story they want to tell. This is especially true if the storyteller wants to have a GMPC and basically wants the other players to go along with their idea of what they want their characters to do. Then yes, I think players should resist, but I don't think that it's always okay. And it is a question. So Requiem with a classic, my introduction to RPGs was actually the board game Hero Quest. Yep. And I think for a whole bunch of people in a certain period of time, Hero Quest was a way to introduce people to it, because Hero Quest is an idea of, we're going to present you with a narrative light, but also mechanics heavier kind of game, but with that kind of feeling of, I can choose how to go about doing this in more ways than just roll the dice, move 3 spaces, see what happens. So it is a thing. And communication is difficult. You are right, Cassie. Communication can be difficult, it can be messy, it can be painful, and I think that people who forget that do so at their own peril. Just because it is difficult doesn't mean that there aren't people out there who are very good at it. And once you get good at something, even something that is difficult can feel easy to you. But that doesn't mean that there isn't an inherent difficulty there. And it doesn't mean that sometimes, while it is difficult and while you may be practiced at it, you always run the risk of failure. So it is something that we should be keeping in mind, because I don't want people to assume that those who have a little more difficulty or a little more of a struggle communicating are somehow lesser or deficient. It's a skill. And remember that just because you have a skill and others do not make them lesser than you. You don't know the journey they've taken, and you don't know what skills they have that you do not. So. Oh yeah, Crosshair, so you're interpreting my request for hot takes completely correctly, right? This isn't about state a truth that everyone will agree with. This is about state a thing, a provocative statement to encourage conversation. That's a hot take for me. That's what I want as a hot take. Requiem stating that sometimes plot hooks are not always obvious at first, so the player may not realize that it's a plot hook. Yes, but this is also not players refusing to go along with the story. This is players not recognizing what the story is. There is a balance that needs to be found, and unfortunately, we're trained to hate overt actions sometimes. There's this idea that subtlety is something to be rewarded, especially in the context of narratives and in role-playing games, and this isn't always the case. You want players to figure things out, because if you figure something out, you feel clever. But if you make it too difficult to figure out, they do not feel clever, they feel the opposite, they feel foolish. And unfortunately, that line isn't always easy to gauge. What might be obvious to me somebody who has all the information may not be obvious to somebody who has none of the information. What might be obvious to me knowing the source material may not be obvious to somebody who is only casually aware of the source material. Or worse, somebody may have more knowledge of the source material, which then contradicts what you are trying to put forward. So sometimes you do have to be pretty obvious. And sometimes that obviousness will not be perceived as you being too blatant. It will be perceived as the players actually figuring things out. So. The Crosshair saying, if you don't think you're good at communicating, it's worth trying. It's worth considering trying because someone might be great at coaxing the communication out. This is true. I'd also point out that just because something is difficult doesn't mean that it doesn't take, that it isn't worth learning. Communication can be very, very worthwhile, and it is a skill that I would recommend for people to develop. And it is a skill. So I am understanding of those who are learning, but in much the same way that I'm not going to shout at you if you aren't an expert at building a house the first time you pick up a saw, I shouldn't shout at you if you start trying to communicate and you do so poorly. I should try to be understanding and to meet you halfway. So, ooh, we got a Cassie Mouse hot take. I do want to see that. We'll go back to Requiems, but this one came up first for me. I think my biggest hot take is that it is best to create a simple stereotypical character, build on it from there, rather than trying to do something special and unique at the start. I like this. This is a hot take I can get behind. Oftentimes, games are presented as a way for players to break stereotypes. I find that it can be very fulfilling to embrace a stereotype and then build on it, as Cassie Mouse said, because it is in this way that sometimes we create a world around us that can feel more real because we expect things to work out the way that we want. And then when we come up against exceptions, they feel more important because it doesn't feel like you're trying to be counterculture from the start. It feels like something that you've earned over the course of play. There are absolutely things in role-playing games that exist that are meant for the players to rail against. One of the biggest examples of this is actually Werewolf the Apocalypse, or even Vampire the Masquerade. In Vampire, you're encouraged to get together in what's called a coterie, which is their word for like a group or a band or a sworn kinship or a circle or whatever. It's a group of vampires. But also, vampires are told, thanks, Evil Squeegee. They're awesome. You should go and have a look at their channel too. They've got some really cool stuff going on there. So lurk, lurk, zug, zug. But there's a, but it is specific in Vampire that vampires are solitary creatures a lot of the time. They will work together, but they don't like hanging out together a whole lot. In Werewolf the Apocalypse, werewolves hold some genuinely despicable beliefs sometimes, and sometimes they also hold beliefs that are just outright foolish or self-destructive. And part of that is because then the player characters are encouraged to be the wise ones who come in and try to shake up the system, the status quo. It gives them a reason to fight back, not just against the enemy, but against their allies themselves, and creates drama as a result. This is, I believe, an intended part of the game. But a lot of players just look at it and say, well, I don't want to deal with this because they're all just idiots. And, you know, like, I don't like dealing with the fact that they have these beliefs that are clearly pig-headed and wrong. But that is the point. But sometimes it can be nice to embrace a stereotype, because in embracing the stereotype, then you can move forward and challenge that stereotype more effectively than if you just were challenging it from the beginning. So I actually think I agree with Cassie Mouse. I'm not saying that you always have to follow stereotypes, but I do think that you should be encouraged to look at stereotypes as ways to create a foundation for your character, as opposed to simply being exactly what you need to run away and avoid. So that helps. Oh, the bot. Here, I will launch the bot. It's on a separate computer, unfortunately, so I don't always remember, but I will get there. So let's have a look at Requiem's hot take here while we're doing hot takes. Not good at hot takes, so you can rate this as you wish, but I thought of it from last week's clinic hours and talking about people getting mad at players for not doing X, Y, or Z. A PC is not always aware of the most optimal decision. Just because the player might know the best way to solve a problem does not mean their character would necessarily know. So if you're talking to me, who is starting the bot, there we go. There, so that's starting, and you'll be able to try again to add the quote in a second. If you're talking to me and if you're part of this kind of community, this is a lukewarm take. This is a hot take for other people. Absolutely. The idea that you don't necessarily want to do something that is optimal because of a role-playing experience or the narrative is a player type decision. There are player types out there who will care more about the narrative or their character than necessarily optimizing their play. Power gamers, and to a certain extent tacticians, and to an even also to an extent butt kickers, will be people who really want to manipulate the mechanics of the system and their character's strategy to their utmost, to their maximum. Whereas people who are more storytellers or methods or specialists or casuals may be more involved with trying to figure out what their character would do in any certain moment, or they may not care if they have the most optimal strategy. They may not care if they haven't completely optimized their mastery of the system, because that's not what they're in for playing. And I think that's totally fine. As a narrative storyteller, I prefer when players go with their gut and play the game and play the story instead of specifically trying to focus on the mechanics. But I recognize that that's not everybody. I will point out that there's a little bit of like selective behavior that you can see going on with some of this stuff, whereby you will absolutely find... Oh, I gotta click this. I will point out that there is... people will often say like, well, I have to strategize to my optimum, but in doing so, they're ignoring elements. So, such as if you have a low wisdom or intelligence, could you actually come up with the strategy in the first place, or would you rely on somebody else to tell you what to do that is most optimal? Because players will often suddenly decide to have their characters take the most optimized path, even if their characters would have never realized it in the first place. So, you know, there's some of that there, but that's getting nitpicky, and I don't want to imply that people shouldn't do that, because I think that in some ways part of the game is to execute the game as you want to execute it, and staying fully true to your character isn't always worth it. Shirnosho points out, which unfortunately I had to copy and paste in because Feature.chat was being a jerk. I agree with it so much, Cassie. After playing with the same group and always with the impulse to create super complicated characters from the start, mostly only to fall apart during play, I'd say starting simple and plain is actually even harder and all the more rewarding. I don't think it's harder, I think it's just not intuitive for certain people. People who want to create a huge experience and they front load it with all kinds of stuff in the backstory are perhaps doing themselves a disservice. I strongly encourage people who are looking to play to not figure everything out at the beginning, to try to keep things simple and then grow into the character. Because also the more that you create in advance, first off, the less kind of room that you're giving yourself once game starts, and second, the more you're actually demanding of everybody else to do what you want instead of you fitting in with everybody else. And in general, a group will feel better, I believe, if everybody is figuring things out together, rather than one person dictating the flow and everybody else just deciding that that's how it's going to have to be. Remember that a storyteller doesn't dictate as much of the flow as people believe, and the storyteller's job is to make everybody have a good time. Players often believe that it is their job to maximize their own enjoyment because that's what everybody else is doing and we can all have fun together. They don't necessarily have the mindset of my job should be that everybody at the table has fun. They assume that that's the storyteller's job. So don't resist the urge to drive so much of the story by just loading your backstory way too hard. The other thing is you'll just end up disappointed because I will ignore large parts of your backstory if I don't consider it necessary. And if you've already established so much in your backstory and you're unwilling to deviate from it, then you can't enjoy the benefit of learning your character at the same time. So there is that. Cassie Mouse, damn it, come on. Featured chat. It has a thing where when you try to put in a text, sometimes it just says that there's an error and then it refuses to do it, so you have to do it manually. I really got to look it up to see if there's something on my end that I have to look at. I do prefer to attain a level of system mastery so I can be comfortable enough to roleplay. It's hard to focus on multiple things at once. You said earlier that it's important to practice specific skills. So yes, what you're talking about is cognitive load. When you're playing, there's a lot of things to keep track of at once. And if you are focused on one thing, then the other things will suffer because you don't have enough cognitive load to handle it all. It's kind of like a CPU, right? If you're asking your computer to do one thing, then no problem. Ask your computer to do 500 things at once, and it depends on how hard it is for the computer to do those things. Asking it to display something on the screen and play a sound and show a web page, not terribly hard. But if you're starting to ask it to render 4K video, but then also we want you to display this real-time 3D modeling software, and we want you to be playing 500 different channels of audio all at once, and the computer will start to chug. Your brain can only handle so much. So if it is constantly trying to remember how to play the game instead of having it kind of locked in as a routine that it can go through, then it's going to be using a lot of its cycles on remembering how to play the game or figuring out the optimal strategy. And that's all CPU cycles in your head that you can't use for other things. It's kind of like for acting. The reason why actors memorize their lines instead of reading them, the reason why actors memorize their lines and why they need to know them really, really well isn't because they can't have their script on stage. That's obviously part of it. But if an actor doesn't know their script backwards and forwards, if I can't say a line and then you immediately say what the next line is afterwards, if you kind of have to think about it for a second, all of that thinking is thinking that you're doing instead of performing. You're thinking about performing instead of actually performing, and your performance suffers as a result. If you're thinking about role-playing instead of actually role-playing, you may find that your CPU cycles aren't being spent where you want to spend them, especially if you're a narrative-type player. Giant Rat Guy, that is absolutely correct. If you are rapping and you don't know it by heart, even if you're reading it off a piece of paper, you still have to interpret, am I putting this at the right cadence? Am I putting the emphasis on the right syllables? Am I doing this in the right melody? Am I doing this in the right key? Am I breathing where I need to breathe? It is essential for somebody to actually know these things in advance, so that then when you're performing, you can put your emphasis on places that create the difference between somebody reading lines off a page and somebody creating music. And Cassie Mouse, saying that your brain has a low cognitive load capacity, I don't necessarily think that that's true. I think that a lot of people believe they have a low cognitive load capacity, but they don't understand or realize how many things they have to focus on at any one point in time. It also matters because some people have to spend more cognitive load on things that others take for granted. So, for example, I'm sitting in my chair right now. I have had this chair for several years now, and I invested in this chair. Knowing that I was spending a lot of time sitting at a desk, I needed to make sure that I had a chair that would support me. This chair has very specific things to keep my elbows in the right place, my forearms in the right place, my back at the right thing. I can lean back, but it will provide for a certain amount of pressure. So it means that my body doesn't have to think about posture nearly as much as it once did. And yet I can still get up at the end of the day and I don't feel too sore, and I'm avoiding repetitive stress injury. But that's because I bought a chair for this. Now, if I was to move this chair away and bring in, say, a standard dining room table chair, then all of a sudden I either have to spend cognitive load on, okay, sit up straight, feet flat on the floor, make sure that my hands are in the correct position, and organize my ergonomics that way, or I deliberately don't think about those things, and then I could suffer as a result. And suffering is typically something that we end up doing because we just have put our cognitive load elsewhere. And it is rough to have to spend cognitive load on things you don't want to spend it on. Like, I'll give you another example. I don't like chess. Now, at one point when I was young and I was learning the game, somebody said you have a lot of potential. Perhaps you could be very good at chess. But the thing is, I don't actually like spending my cognitive load on chess. I have enjoyed, when I've played chess, I've enjoyed just screwing around, maybe making the games very quick, so that I can't spend a lot of time thinking about strategy. I have to play more by intuition and feel. And that's more fun to me because I just don't want to spend the load on chess. This is not to say that chess is a bad game. Chess is quite clearly a very popular game and it has a lot going for it. But it's not load that I prefer to do. So if I'm sitting at a game, maybe the cognitive load that I want to spend on is on narrative and not on mechanics, which may also explain why perhaps I'm making suboptimal mechanical play. But if I've studied the mechanics a lot and I've put them into my brain, I've preloaded that cognitive load by spending hours on practice first. Now I can make mechanical decisions while focusing on my roleplay. So I've already put the work in, and now it is less load because I've preloaded it. So that helps in ways. Giant Rat Guy, I'm not gonna lie, the chair was expensive. It kind of made me feel very panicked when I pushed the button to purchase it. I think that it was worth every penny at this point for me, especially considering the nature of my work. And now that I work from home, I'm in this chair a lot, and I don't want to end up hurting myself. I know that this isn't always an option for people. I was lucky that at the time I had the money to spend on this chair. And also I, saved up enough so that I could afford the chair. But I do recommend, if it is something that you're worried about, being able to take care of yourself ergonomically is an important investment to make. Not just financially, but also just your physical well-being. Like, for instance, my desk is lower than most people would ever choose, but that's because that's where it should be so that I can sit ergonomically. And when somebody else has sat at a desk at my height, they've complained saying, well, your keyboard's so low, I find it uncomfortable. When the reality is they need to get past that discomfort and realize that this is how their body should be working. They're just not used to it. So instead, they're typing with their hands up here, raising their arms and elbows, and then wondering why they're stressed in their shoulders at the end of the day. But they don't think about it, so it is a thing. And Elizabeth, blowing my load on chess is isn't that the plot of The Queen's Gambit? So Cassie Mouse says, for example, say a teacher was writing off a list of names and tasking us to rank them at the same time. I can't do that. When I was actually put in that position, I froze up, couldn't do anything, and almost had a panic attack. Because your load is being spent elsewhere. It's not that you have less of a load, it's that you're focused on other things. And for some of us, we're focused on other things because we have to. This is something as simple as, I have allergies, so when I'm picking something to eat, I have to spend some time thinking about, can I eat this? If I have, if I'm shy, I have to spend cognitive load on overriding my body's desire to be alone. If I am bored, I have to spend some of my cognitive load on looking like I'm interested, because otherwise socially I'm doing something incorrect. So I'd urge you to reevaluate your thinking and not think that you are somehow lesser, but just that you have other priorities and different priorities that you need or want to focus on. So there is that. But there are things that also my brain's just not good at. Like, I create worlds, but I can freeze up sometimes if somebody asks me what's their name. Because all of a sudden I'm like, I care that the name is good. I care that the name fits in with the character and fits in with the universe. But I don't like coming up with names off the, like a list of names beforehand to pull from, because I want the name to fit the character. But that means that I have to come up with fuck. And so that's something that takes more cognitive load for me. And some people can just come up with names and they don't care whether it fits perfectly. And you know what? 95% of the time it fits perfectly anyway. And that person has the advantage on me. And that's just the way life is. So it's just life. Sometimes certain types of cognitive load actually facilitate focusing on other things, though rather from taking it. Actually facilitate focusing on other things, though, rather than taking from it. Like, you get better at writing/drawing, etc. once you're focused on, say, background music. The thing about flow is that it makes you forget what otherwise gets in the way. Game mechanics can get you there too, I think. So you're talking about the state of flow. This is something that game designers talk about a lot. It's something that is more applicable to video games, but it can definitely apply in performative aspects as well, whereby the body starts, or rather the mind starts to do things automatically instead of having to use or spend cognitive load on it. This is known as a flow state, and it's very common in games with abnegation or with certain skill levels. So it could be that maybe you listen to an audiobook while you grind XP on your character in World of Warcraft. It could be that you just start finding where the blocks need to go in a game of Tetris without thinking where they should go. You just know where they should go, and it's up to your hands now to get them to where they need to be. And in role-playing, you can hit a flow state as well. Once you've embodied your character specifically, you may have to spend less amount of time or cognitive load on that character, and then you can afford to spend more elsewhere just because you're so inhabited in that body. And this kind of gets back to something that Requiem said a little bit ago, which we can throw up here. Don't know if this is true for professional actors, but in high school I tended to memorize the entire script word for word just so I could always know where I was in the play we were, how many lines before mine and whatnot. Actually kept my stress low because I felt more in control. The reason why actors tend to memorize their lines like that is because when they enter a flow state, if they don't have the lines memorized, they'll forget what to say. Actors try to enter into a flow state because then they don't have to think about how they're portraying their characters. Not all actors do this. There's different processes and different ways that actors approach a role. But when I want to really get into a character, the last thing I want to do is to try to think about remembering my lines, because that's going to take me out of it. Then I'm John on stage trying to remember my lines and then portraying someone else. But if I enter a flow state, I'm no longer John at that point. And that's part of the reason why acting is, on a professional level, why acting can be dangerous in some ways. It's because of that flow state. Now, I'm actually going to ask, if Liz is still here, I would really like to get her opinion on this, as she's done more professional acting work than I have. But flow is dangerous, not just because it's not necessarily physically dangerous, although it can be. But the idea of inhabiting a character and getting lost in a character to perform well, to really understand that character and go well. The problem is that flow state, if it's uncontrolled, can lead to bleed into your real life. It can lead you to do things that are inappropriate or to feel things that are inappropriate. I'll take an example. The most common example would be that if you are playing a character who's in love with another character, then it can be thrilling if you enter into that flow state, because then you get to experience love. And it's also weird because you get to experience like new love, new energy, new relationship energy experience. But that love isn't real. You've just engineered your body and your mind to feel that love because you've entered into a flow state. And then it's kind of bad because then if you've given way too much into it, well, you've put forward too much of that emotion, and that's where bleed comes from. And this is often where bleed comes from for role players as well. This is why a lot of actors, well, okay, not a lot of actors, but this is why you hear stories of actors who end up hooking up with their co-stars while they're on the film or the set or the show or whatever. But then soon after that show ends, the relationship peters out because the flow state isn't there to maintain it. So there is that as well to kind of deal with. But this can apply to any of emotions, right? Like if I truly hate somebody and I enter into that flow state of hating that person, I have seen actors get a little rough. They start shoving. They start being physically aggressive. They start being socially aggressive because they've just got that anger in them. They've entered into that flow state, and that's also dangerous, which is why there's a lot of things like here, like this is saying. So let's actually just call that up because this is important stuff. Agreed. It is vital to maintain a safe distance between yourself and your role. You're an actor, it's okay. There's choreography, dance, fight, movement, etc. that you need to perform accurately. That's safety. You need to protect your emotional state. You are allowed. You are not a mannequin with a tape recorder in them. Protecting yourself also means protecting those around you. In this way, there is this concept of like flow is something that can be very useful for an actor and can be very fun. And it's okay to enjoy. Part of the reason why people enjoy acting is because they get to enjoy being somebody else. That's why we role play. We get to enjoy being somebody else. And that's fine. And entering into that flow state isn't inherently dangerous in and of itself, but it is important to put a certain amount of constraint on it. And that's part of the reason why choreography is so important and why intimacy direction, which is kind of a more recent thing that has been coming up in the performing world, is incredibly important, because these are things that essentially mean that your cognitive load is shifted away from do what your character would do and is now shifted towards do these exact steps, because it helps control that flow. It helps you still be creative in the moment, still perform, still enjoy that performance, but also keeping yourself and everyone around you safe. It's why you should never strike somebody for real, even if it's a performance and they're like, I can take it. Striking somebody for real, if you enter a flow state and you put a little too much oomph behind that punch and then you rupture their spleen, you're going to be the one who is the asshole, right? This is why if I had a choice in the Academy voting, and I do not, I would have never given Joaquin Phoenix an Oscar for Joker, because he doesn't respect other actors on stage. It's all about him. And that's a problem. I don't think that makes you a good actor. I think that makes you a selfish actor. And everybody else doing everything they can to support you as you're being a selfish actor means that everybody else deserves the award and not you. So that's my lukewarm take of the day. Well, one among many. And what Elizabeth says here is correct. Don't worry about trying to be funny. It's a common trap, and just listen to your partners. I find when I put the focus on my scene partner, it takes the pressure off myself. This is one of the things that I find is the easiest for me as a storyteller. When I focus on trying to give my players a story that they want, I find I do better than if I try to specifically make a story. I shift some of the responsibility onto them. I want to see what their PCs are going to do. What are their PCs going to do to contribute to this narrative? Because if I focus too much on what can I do to put the narrative forward, I'm leaving them out. Not good. But I'm also taking on all of the responsibility myself, when in fact, I'm only a quarter of the people at the table. There may be some extra load that's placed upon the storyteller, but it doesn't have to be 99% of it. So, I mean, it helps that I have very giving players. The concept of make sure that everyone at the table is having fun is basically, like, as far as I can tell, the guiding principle of every single one of my players, which is just such a joy for me. And it hasn't always been that way. I'm not saying that Liz and Scott and Kate weren't always this way. I mean, like, I've had players who absolutely weren't this way, and I put up with it for decades. And I shouldn't have. Kung Fu Fenris mentions a very specific point, which is that I have been some seriously fucked up people in my LARPing. I've had to be very careful about this in the past. Yep. So that is bleed. Flow is kind of like the precursor to bleed. And in some ways, there's some bleed that happens just because, like, you screwed over my character in game, so now I hate you in real life. But that's kind of like less bleed as we define it and more just like reacting to somebody in an out-of-game context. But yeah. Will this Q&A be uploaded to YouTube? Yeah, all the clinic hours these days are being uploaded to YouTube. So yes, there will be. The thing is that eventually we're going to have to start discussing topics and scripting them and making scripted content for these sorts of things. Because unfortunately, listening to a 2-hour clinic hours isn't really the sort of thing that YouTube's built for. Because we could get this across in like 2 or 3 minutes in a tightly scripted sequence, and that can be more compelling. But we're at some point we're going to have to just figure out what people want to see from us at RPG Clinic and what we are interested in doing, right? It's kind of a two-way street there. So, okay, so this is something, I don't know if you intended to put this as a hot take, but I'm going to use it as a hot take. LARPing, where some people use the game as a kind of therapy, is no fun for anyone. Role-playing should never be used as unilateral therapy. If you are showing up and you're deciding that you're going to work through some issues that you have, and you don't let anybody else know this, but then every other game that you play in, you break down crying because you're dragging really rough emotional stuff up, you're not actually helping anybody. You're actively making other people's time worse, and you're not getting the help that you need yourself. And I unfortunately have had to deal with this, and I've dealt with this poorly myself in the past. So I'm going to put forward a light content warning at this point for body dysmorphia. I am going to try to explain this as best that I can, but this is, I mean, this is a very light content warning. I'm not getting into huge stuff, but I have had people LARP with me while they were exploring their nonconformity to their assigned gender. And the thing is, in a lot of ways, this can be very healthy. That's fine. You know, if you were assigned female at birth and you decide that you want to try playing a male because that's how you truly feel, it's just that society hasn't made that acceptable, then that's something. But I've had people who were very much not ready to accept that body dysmorphia in themselves. So they would show up to game, they would LARP it out, they would feel horrible because I couldn't even begin to explain exactly how that person was feeling, but they were working through their internalized transphobia in a role-playing game where everyone else was just trying to play fairies. And it didn't help anybody because this person was then struggling with their own issues. Every other game would run away crying and somebody would have to run after them, chasing them down the street, making sure that they were okay. It was really rough. And this person kept saying, like, thank you for this opportunity. I'm really appreciating it. I'm learning so much about myself. And I'm like, you're miserable and everyone else around you is miserable. Dysphoria. Sorry. Yes, Luke. No, I appreciate it. That you're correct. I used the incorrect term there and I should have used dysphoria. And that is not rude at all. Please correct me on those sorts of things. I desperately want people to correct me, especially if I mispronounce your name, by the way. I really like being able to pronounce people's names correctly because mine is so often mispronounced. And I'm not saying that that's because people are bad, but like I would rather have my name pronounced correctly. So I try to make sure that I pronounce other people's names correctly. So it is rough, because this person was trying to use a LARP that I was running as therapy without everyone else's consent. And without even perhaps their own consent. It's not useful. It is, and the unfortunate reality is that that person, after I'd say maybe 10 sessions, never saw them again. Never saw them again. And the friend who introduced them to the game disappeared as well. Never saw him again either. And that was unfortunate. But when they disappeared, the game got better and people started having more fun because we didn't have to worry about whether somebody wasn't going to be okay constantly. This is not to say that you have to like hide if you're not feeling right. I mean, there's a reason that we carry these at every game because it is important that if you are not feeling okay, that you can do something about it. We have these for a reason. But if you know going into game that you're not going to be okay, or if you know going into game that you're trying to use it to process some stuff that you really should be, seeking professional help with, please don't do it. It is, and the hard part is that I did not have the tools 20 years ago when this happened. Well, 17 years ago when this happened. I didn't have the tools to be able to help this person. I'm not certain I'd have the tools to help this person now. It is not, I don't think this person is like guilty of a crime. I just feel badly that I couldn't help them. And I felt badly that this person's struggle was hurting everyone else at the same time. Because that just wasn't the place for it. It's not that I wouldn't want to help. It's that in the set hours where we're playing a game is not the time to just bring up what you need. Bring up what you need outside of game. I recognize that the role-playing community, and specifically the online communities that we're a part of, we have a larger than average representation of those who are on the LGBTQ spectrum, on the neurodivergent spectrum, on the gender spectrum. And I don't think this is an accident. I think that role-playing has a large... there are those who gravitate to role-playing for one reason or another, and I think some of it is that role-playing helps us figure out who we are. And it is a thing that I do have to be open about the fact that for good or ill, I am not, I mean, I try to define myself as an ally, but I am pretty, I'm pretty much your base standard white cis het dude. So just please understand that I'm doing whatever I can to be better and I'm doing whatever I can to support those who I can here. But I am also coming from a position of privilege, and I'm also coming from a position of ignorance. So if I do say anything wrong in any of these things, or if I start being overly hurtful, I'm not saying that it is your responsibility to let me know. I'm trying to say that I'm trying to do better. Don't feel like you have to hesitate if you need to correct me, but also don't feel like it's your job to correct me, because it's not. It's my job to figure shit out on my own. So I'm really glad to hear that, Luke. I'm glad that that's what we can do. But just yeah, that is something else. This is not a hot take. This is a fucking lukewarm take if I've ever heard one. But it's, if you are, it is better for you to be proactive at finding out how you can do better than wait for somebody else to tell you that you fucked up. This isn't actually about things like meeting people on the LGBTQ spectrum. This is just about everything, and so therefore about role-playing. Try to look into your own gameplay. Try to look into your own experiences and see if you can do better. And don't necessarily wait for somebody else to use their word hole, because it's not always that easy. As much as we use the term use your word hole here a lot, and I want to encourage people to feel like they can, I also recognize that it's not easy. There are entire swaths of the population who have basically been told that they shouldn't use their word hole, or that they should make sure to only use their word hole when it will not hurt someone else's feelings. There are people who feel shy. There are people for whom their particular personalities make it difficult for them to speak up for themselves. There are people out there who also just like to feel like maybe their suffering means that other people are having a better time and they'd prefer that. This is why I encourage people to use their word holes, but you can't expect others to do so. You kind of have to be proactive about it. You got to seek people out and try to find out ways to be better for them, instead of just waiting for them to tell you what you could do better. Because if that's what I was going to do, well, then I guess I'm a perfect representation of being just a straight up white dude, huh? So, rip. So Cassie Mouse said something which I think is important. Proper therapy and regular social contact are important to maintaining mental balance so that you can take part in things like role-playing games. I have heard this described in one way. This is not my turn of phrase, but I have heard this described this way, and so I'm going to put that out there and see how the chat reacts to it. You need to be in reasonable working order to be in a relationship. So what this doesn't mean is that you have to be perfect, but it does mean that if you are going through a lot, if you are figuring yourself out, if you are quite ill, or I'm not saying that, I'm not saying that all the stuff that we've been talking about is an illness, but if you are, say, suffering from depression, if you are not okay, it is unfair of you to walk up to someone and say, accept me for who I am, because I haven't been able to. Thank you, Luke. That's appreciated. I love seeing how like, oh, I guess the exchange rate must be this today. Even though of course it's in US dollars and we don't take it in US dollars. We take it in Canadian dollars because we are not American. There was a period of time in my life where I was suffering from depression and anxiety, and like these sorts of things. Like I have it all kind of controlled at this point. I feel like it got better for me. It is something that I'm aware of and that I have to kind of keep looking back on. But at that time, I was not in a position where I should have been running role-playing games, because I wasn't able to be effective, because I was more focused on getting better of myself and worrying about like my interactions with all my friends. And I wasn't focusing on making everyone happy. I was focusing on myself. And that's what I needed to do. I needed to take the time to focus on myself. And therefore I couldn't be there for other people. And therefore I probably shouldn't have been running games at that point. Ultimately the biggest 404 of all. And so this is, and I'm not saying that, of course, that like if you're in a relationship with somebody and then you develop an illness, well, then it's you should do the noble thing and, you know, like walk off into the sunset and leave them be so that they don't have to deal with you. That's not what I'm saying at all. But if you are establishing a relationship with somebody and you are not in current okay working order, then you're basically shouldering a lot of things onto them that maybe you shouldn't be. In much the same way for a role-playing game, if you're not okay, role-playing games are not going to make you okay. And if you're not okay and you show up to a role-playing game and then you unload all of your not being okay onto that game, you're not doing anybody, least of all yourself, any favors. So just be careful about that. You don't have to be perfect. You don't even have to be like 99%. But if you are definitely not okay, it's important to work on being okay first. Then you can move on from there. And remember that okay does not equal normal. You don't have to be normal. You just have to be okay. Okay with yourself. That's what's important. God, don't try to be normal. Just try to be okay. Okay is way better than normal. Let's move on to the crosshair here. Unless, of course, remember, if anybody has anything to say about what I just said, I am tossing out some spicy things at this point. Quick topic fitting, let's try a bit of a hotter take, maybe Heat 15. Well, at least I got 32 under my belt, right? You can't prep a game and think of everyone's feelings, all the possible issues, all the things that might offend. Some things have to be dealt with as they come. This is completely true. This is part of the reason why we use cards in the context of play, because you can't anticipate everything. And you shouldn't try. If I was to sit down and psychoanalyze every one of my players and try to figure out all of their various different things that they may or may not enjoy or that may or may not cause them emotional distress, I'd still get it wrong. Because these things change constantly. We forget. Something that wasn't okay is all of a sudden okay. Something that was okay is all of a sudden not. So no. This is part of the reason why my particular style doesn't involve as much prep, because I'd rather see how things grow organically, but also because I've developed now in such a way that I can more easily, I've trained my cognitive load to be able to pivot if I need to very quickly because I see that somebody isn't okay. So yeah, this is absolutely something that I believe is correct. So Luke saying, I flip between I'm lonely, I want to seek a relationship, and I'm probably not ready right now a lot. My heart goes out to you. It's not an easy place to be in, and I've been in that place. And I think a lot of us have been in that place. And I think that the older you get, the more likely it is that at some point in time you've been in that place. The idea that loneliness hurts and that we want to be with somebody else is incredibly true. It's also true that seeking out somebody else is not the solution to your problems. So it is rough. I sympathize. But I also would point out that it does get better. It is not easy, but it does get better. And then when it does, it doesn't actually matter. Do not worry about things like, but I get to a certain age and then I can't be in a relationship, or I look around and all my friends are married and I'm not even in a relationship yet. What do I do? It's okay. It's okay. It will be okay. Things do not turn out the way that they're supposed to a lot of the time. There's a reason why I hang out with a lot of people who are 5 years younger than I am. And it's because I spent about 5 years adrift before I was able to like refocus and get to where I needed to be. And I was worried at a certain point, being like, oh man, these 5 years, like I've wasted 5 years and no one's ever going to take me seriously. Everyone else finds success at age X and now I'm age X and I'm not there yet because I'm 5 years too late. First of all, I'm not 5 years too late. I used to think that I was, but I'm not. But the second is that it's fine and it will work out. Just trust in it. Get the help that you need. Find support where you can, support others where you can, but you can make it. I am thrilled with where I am in my life right now. And yes, there are things that I wish were better, but that's what keeps us alive. We strive to do better. We strive to keep pushing forward, but don't start getting hung up over whether you're okay compared to somebody else, or whether you are doing as well as somebody who's in a similar situation as you, because you don't know what those similar situations are. The reason why I hang out with people who are younger than I am, very simply, I ended up attending university 5 years later than somebody typically would. And this surprised a lot of people because I was quite good at school. I'm not going to get into my own life story, but suffice to say that this was seen as a shock that I stopped attending school, and that I also redid certain aspects of school, trying to figure out where I wanted to be in my life. I went through some shit, and then when I came out of it, when I entered university and found friends who are the ones who have stuck by me and who I've stuck by, it just turns out that most of them entered university in the quote-unquote standard time, and I didn't. So I had to get past that. And for a little while, I started worrying whether this made me feel like whether this was a deficiency on my part. And I don't think it is. And as Requiem says, yeah, the older that you get, the age gap means less and less. And that's true too. Because it also comes down to things like maturity and life experience. And also age is, it's age isn't necessarily a construct, but the concept behind it a lot of the times is just something that you work out and deal with. But you'll be all right. You'll be fine. You will be fine if you believe in it. My current issue with age is my body's trying to fuck me over with age. That's fair. Yeah, and I see like Real Brick Wall saying the same thing. Right? I have a friend like a decade older than I am, because of university asynchronicity, and it's no big deal. Completely true. And that's kind of what I have discovered in the end. The friends that I had that were my age, I drifted away from all of them for various different reasons. It's fine. It's okay. I imagine that some of them I drifted away from because I probably just wasn't in a good position to be friends with them at that point. I think that I drifted away from something because they weren't in a good position to be friends with me. But all of this ends up working out in the end. Role-playing is a unifier in a lot of ways because we get to pretend to be people we're not. So things like gender or age or socioeconomic status or any of the other manners of diversity can melt away if they need to be melted away, or they can change if you so choose, or they're also a way for you to start looking at other elements of diversity in a different fashion. So all of this ends up working out. Just believe in your role playing. I don't even know if I want to know what this is for, but at any rate, okay, here's a question. I'm going to get back to the others, but this seems like a relatively easy question to answer. Like, how I love this tool so much, and yet it fails on me so often. Do I feel more you with or without glasses? I notice that you don't always wear them. I tend to wear my glasses a lot because it's just easier. truth be told, I wish I didn't have to wear them. It's not because I don't think that like they look good or anything like that. It's just I find them kind of a pain, because if I don't have my glasses on, then it becomes harder for me to read things on screens. That's basically the reason I wear them. I have, my eyes are a bit weird in that I'm not terribly nearsighted. My prescription hovers at around like -1.5 and -1.25, but I have astigmatism, and the astigmatism is actually what makes it harder for me to make out things like text. So if I take my glasses off and I'm looking at a screen, I can make out the text if I like squint, but even then it's kind of difficult. The other thing is I have amblyopia. I hope I'm saying that correctly, in my left eye, which means that my left eye can't be corrected perfectly. I don't notice it because my brain has trained itself to forget about it. But if I close my right eye, reading things becomes a little more difficult because my left eye just isn't as strong as my right, and it can never be. Some people have thought that this is because I have like an undiagnosed lazy eye, and now it can never be fixed because I'm too old, but others have said no. But it is for that reason, and the other reason being that I have very thin cornea, that I can't get laser eye surgery. And I was going to. I really wanted it. My older sister got it. Her eyes are way worse than mine, at least in terms of like nearsightedness. And now she doesn't wear glasses and she absolutely adores it. I wish that I could, and I've asked like 3 separate clinics, and my eyes just can't. They don't want to, because if they screw up one eye, normally they're like, well, you have 2, so you can see out the other one. But since my left eye can't be corrected, they don't want to risk it on me, because if they screw up my right eye, then I will never be able to get back to 20/20 vision. So they say no. Plus my cornea are thin as fuck. So I wear glasses because it's easier. I do have contact lenses, and I wear those contacts at times. Specifically, I wear contacts for Sunday's games. Because as funny as it is, because it makes it easier on our setup. These glasses, as you can see, shadow my eyes somewhat, and this camera is pointing directly at me. So it's a bit better, but I was noticing when we were playing that the position of the camera was putting my glasses like in relation to the camera. How do I show it? It was casting a shadow directly over my eyes, and it was becoming difficult to see my pupils, and that was harder to show off my emotional face because my eyes are being obscured. So I started taking them off because of the way that the camera was positioned and putting in contacts instead. Again, like I can function perfectly well without these. Like I'm not bumping into things. I can recognize people. It's mostly just text that I can't see properly, and so I wear my glasses. That's me. But I don't identify with my glasses, I guess is what I would say. I don't wear them as a fashion statement. So, and yeah, contacts when you have astigmatism and are annoying. I can't wear contacts for as long as others can. I get like my eyes just dry out because of my thin cornea. Like I can wear them for game time, like no problem, but my eyes need a rest sooner. It might just be because I'm not used to them because I don't wear them as often, but like, ugh, it can be rough. It can be rough. So there is that. So look, I am fine with wearing my glasses, but they're just not a part of me. So, so let's see. What did I miss here? Any other hot takes that I missed? Oh yeah, you did DM your hot takes on Discord. That is true. Or did you? Oh, you have a new one. Haha. Okay. Crosshair, I would encourage you to post that. Post that in the chat. I would definitely do that. I think that's worth discussing, and I don't think it's too caliente. So yeah, please post that. You don't know pain until you get that. No, for me, the pain was once I lost a contact because it rolled up underneath my eyelid, and I was like, I can't get this out, and that sucked. Funny story, my mother, who wore contacts, lost her contact on the floor of a limousine as they were pulling up to the red carpet for the 2000 Academy Awards, I believe it was, and she had basically 20 seconds to find it because the limousines are on such a set schedule. They pull up, you have to get out, and then they move on because there's a train of limousines that go all like way down. So she was worried that she was going to have to watch the one time that she was able to go to the Academy Awards. She was going to have to watch without her glasses because she didn't bring them, and without her contacts. So then she had to find her contact. She found it with about 2 seconds to spare, grabbed it, rushed into a bathroom, and rinsed it and put them on. But she was walking down the red carpet in a dress that she bought at Winners, with only one eye being able to see properly. So, so when I think of contacts, I think of those, because also that was when you got contacts. They weren't dailies. This was like contacts that you wore for like basically permanence. So they were like for months or a month or whatever. So, so that happened. And then she also ended up, in a bathroom where Charlize Theron, who won that year, tore her dress and was shocked to see like 4 dressmakers descend upon the bathroom so that they can fix her gown before she left to present an award or to accept one. And she happened to be in the bathroom at the same time. So, yes, my mother was at the Academy Awards. My father is a filmmaker and has been involved in the Academy Awards for quite some time and is now a member of the Academy. But typically my father didn't really get to go, and he didn't want to go. He's shy, didn't want to do that, and he was actually one of the ones who was who pushed to make it so that you didn't have to have the producers be the one accepting awards if you didn't want to, for the short categories: best animated, best live action shorts, best documentary shorts, because oftentimes it was the director who was kind of more the driving force behind those films as opposed to the producer. But sometimes he did get to go, and one time he got to go with his wife. Every time my father attended the Academy Awards, his film lost. When he didn't go, most of the time he won. So that just it's not always about attending, folks. But yeah. So let's see here. Let's call up this Crosshair Heat 25 take. I can do Heat 25. Let's try Heat 25 hot take, and this will sound horrible without caveats, etc., but tabletop role-playing games aren't for everyone, and certain kinds of people need to stay out. Hot take, I completely agree with it. I don't think that role-playing games are for everyone. And I'm not even going to say like, oh, well, you know, if you don't enjoy role-playing, that you shouldn't have to. Like, that goes without saying. If you don't want to do it, don't do it. And I think that there are people out there who wouldn't have fun doing it, and they shouldn't do it. I think there's also people out there who just should stay away from it entirely because they just wreck the experience for everyone else. There are, in much the same way that like don't enter a relationship if you're not in good working order, don't play in a role-playing game if you're not in good working order. And there are people who, but like the qualifications for good working order are different for role-playing games, but there are people who absolutely just shouldn't be there. There are people who use tabletop role-playing games as a way to bully others, as a way to coerce others, as a way to get from others what they couldn't get normally. I see this happen where people want to enact power fantasies or sexual fantasies that are not reciprocated. They are not, but in the context of role-playing, are made to feel like they have to. Role-playing is sometimes used as a gaslighting technique. These are people who should not be playing, period. There are people who use live action role-playing games as an excuse for bad behavior. People who go to these games so that they can do things that they aren't allowed to do in real life, and then be able to excuse themselves by saying it was all a game, it was just in character. These people shouldn't be playing, straight up. They just shouldn't. Tabletop role-playing games see the same thing as LARPs in some of those sequences as well. I am not against somebody flirting with somebody in a role-playing game. Absolutely not. I'm also not against two people deciding to explore things in a role-playing game if it's a mutual thing and they're not hurting anybody. It's fine. I am against somebody who says, well, your character now has to be with my character because I have charisma 18. And then I'm going to describe to you in very, very exacting detail just what my character does to your character when they're alone together. This I don't agree with. And I've seen it. And I've tried to stop it where I could. It's not fun. It's not fair. And this shit doesn't belong. So, no. Stab it. I mean, it's I don't want to go, let's make it so I don't have to go. Yeah, exactly. It's thankfully, I do think that there are people who can make mistakes and then learn from those mistakes. I know that this sounds like I'm excusing their behavior, and I'm not, but I do believe that there are people out there who can make mistakes and then be like, whoa, I was shitty, and then do better. I absolutely believe in redemption, and I do believe in forgiveness if that forgiveness and redemption is earned. But I think that there are people out there who just shouldn't be sitting down at a table with other people because I don't believe in their redemption or their forgiveness. Kevin Spacey can fuck right off if he thinks he wants to role play with me, right? Like, that's just sort of like the way it is. So I should also point out that if I ever describe anything and you see yourself in something that I've described, don't think that this means that I hate you automatically, because I don't. I have made mistakes. I have made mistakes in my past. I will make mistakes today, and I will make mistakes in the future. The important thing is, do I try to mitigate the mistakes in advance? Do I learn from the mistakes when I make them? Do I try to do better? And do I at least have the capacity to make sure that I don't hurt somebody as best I can? So it is just something that I want you to take into consideration. I have made mistakes that I justified to myself at the time as being like, well, they were doing this, so I did that, which was dumb. I've made mistakes. Like, look, I've had whole clinic hours where I've talked about mistakes that I've made. Thankfully, I hope that I haven't made such egregious mistakes that I cannot be forgiven. And I constantly evaluate my behavior to try to see if I have. But things can slip. It is a scary thing to sort of come forward and say, I might have really messed up. And it's true. But the reason I'm saying it that way and that I can't be like definitive about it is because I've seen people make mistakes and not realize it because of how they were brought up, because of how they were socialized, because of the privilege that they carried. And they just had no idea. It can happen. So it's possible that I made a mistake and I didn't know about it. And it's possible I've hurt somebody. I can only hope that I can do better now. And I do believe that to a certain extent, we hurt each other a lot. We do this. Part of relationships and part of love and friendship is to become vulnerable. And in being vulnerable, we also allow ourselves to get hurt. And sometimes we hurt somebody because we deliberately hurt them. Sometimes we hurt them because we were acting in a risky fashion and someone got hurt. And sometimes we hurt somebody because it's a complete accident. It is the way. No, Kate, so please throw in that hot take. So I'm saying all this to you to say, like, don't panic. Don't think that you're beyond redemption or that you don't belong if you've noticed that you've done something that I've criticized. And always feel free to talk to me about things if you're worried. I don't hate any of you. I don't really have the capacity for hate in that particular circumstance, unless you're Kevin Spacey, in which case you suck. You suck, Kevin Spacey. I really liked watching you act. That doesn't forgive you. Fuck you. Anyway, yeah, let's... Kate, I definitely want to see that that hot take, but let's get to Requiem's first. Perhaps not a hot take for your group, but certainly a hot take for some groups I've sat in on. You don't have to have the most damaging character, the most charismatic character, or the most damage-soaking character to have fun. Sometimes your most memorable character is the least optimized, so give it a go. Yeah, this is less of a really hot take and more of like a lukewarm take, but some of the most fun characters I've played are characters that aren't really good at anything. The reason why they are protagonists is because they are in the right place at the right time, and not because and sometimes that's because of luck, and sometimes that's just because other people have dragged that character to where they needed to be. But that can be a fantastic way to play a game. And do avoid the idea that everybody that in the party everything has to be covered. You don't. And avoid the idea that if you are not the absolute best at something, you might as well not, because that's also not true. You don't have to have Dexterity 5. You really don't. You don't have to have Melee 5 to be considered an amazing swordsperson. You don't. And it doesn't make your character somehow better if you actually have full marks. It just doesn't. It's not to say that you can't do that, but sometimes it's okay to not be the absolute best. To have room to move. So here's some hot take. Chances are you know someone who's lost at least one parent. Thinking that's an easy, oh, my character has suffered and now we'll have a reason to cry in a corner for attention ain't cool. I mean, Disney is still making half of their protagonists orphans. It's so narratively, it is often easier to remove family from the equation. I'm not saying it's better, but it can be easier. If you don't have to worry about somebody's parents, then you don't have things like, well, what do I do? This person can't go home. Like, this person wants to go home. Like, they've got a mom and a dad waiting for them. So I don't want to have that, so they're gone. Or I want this film to focus on the protagonist, and I just don't want to focus on the parents. So, dead. Hey, look, it's built-in pathos for my character. So here's the thing. You have to decide what you want for your character. Is it that you want a character who is unattached to the world? You don't have to kill anybody for that. There's, sadly, plenty of people out there who do not have a relationship with their parents because their parents were assholes or are assholes. There are people out there who don't have a relationship with their parents because they don't know who their parents are. There are people out there who don't have a relationship with their parents because their parents are dead and died before they had a chance to develop a relationship with them. Fucking happens. But like, if you're looking for a character who's unattached, don't be lazy and just be like, there's no one in that person's life. Because death of parents isn't just, oh, they're just not a factor in my life anymore. And it isn't a generic sadness that just hangs off your character forever. The relationship that you had with your parent, and then that parent no longer being around, is a thing. Do you want to play somebody who has experienced loss? That's something else. Then you can start thinking along the lines of, who did this character lose? But the idea of choosing something like being an orphan is a bigger decision than a lot of people give it credit for. And it is oftentimes, unfortunately, it's just downright silly for you to make that choice when you could have made any other choice that would have been more in line with the kind of narrative you wanted your character to be. The other side of that is, just as Kate said, there's plenty of people out there who have suffered. Do not make the choices that your characters have suffered lightly, because others may have actually experienced that suffering, and you do not want to be in a position where you have made light of their suffering. Just don't. You know? Like, just don't. And okay, so Real Brick Wall has mentioned some of the stuff that I've mentioned here. Adventurers have tragic backstories that unanchor them from the world because well-adjusted people with lives to get back to don't gear up to fight monsters in far-off locales for money. Yes, but this is lazy. It is... Laziness isn't necessarily always a bad thing, but I would encourage you to try to not be lazy. Being like, why'd you join the army? Well, my parents died and I didn't have anything left in my life, so I went and joined the army. Okay, that can make sense, but being like, my parents are dead and so I'm going to avenge their death. Okay, but like, are you actually, are you fridging your parents? If you're fridging your parents, if you're literally just having them die to spur your character on, be careful. You're using a trope that is ripe for abuse. But I should also point out that my parents are still alive, so I'm not an orphan. Don't pay attention to me. Pay attention to other people. How do I pronounce my surname? Luke, my surname is Verrill. It rhymes with barrel. In French, it is often pronounced Verral, but it is Verrill. It is not Verral. It is not... I've heard somebody say Verrill, which is not quite right. It is Verrill. So Ver... and it is 2 R's, 2 L's, which is the other thing that everybody gets wrong. Also, my first name is not John, and it is never been John. I am Jon, or Jonathan. There's no H between the O and the N. So Requiem has a take. Let's go. My take on tragic backstories is always the same. I don't care if someone has a tragic backstory so long as that tragic backstory does not define their entire character and especially does not work to the detriment of the rest of the table. This is completely true. Remember that if your backstory is so important that it affects everyone else at the table, you are then pushing the table in places that they may not want to go. You're perhaps maximizing your fun over everyone else's fun. Avoid this. Make sure everyone's having a good time, including the orphan who sits at your table. Sorry, what? I didn't say Verral in French, right? I spend most of the day talking in French. That is true. I am not claiming that my French is great, but these days that's what I gotta do. Also, the question I always ask my players when they decide to give their character a tragic background is, okay, how has your character moved past this tragedy? How has your character grown past it? If they cannot answer it, then I recommend they try something else. Honestly, a character that had a tragic past and moved past it is far more interesting than the moody or angsty character that likes to stand in the corner. So the way that I would ask this question, which I think is a great question, and if that works for you, totally go for it, is how does your backstory affect your character today? And if their answer is, well, it makes my character like repressed and withdrawn and doesn't like talking to anybody, then I'll say, great, then you aren't a good fit for this game because I need you to be as part of a group. And you've just described to me as my character can't be a part of a group. And they'll be like, no, well, I can be friends with those people. And I'm like, aha. So what you're saying is that it's more complicated than just Bad thing happened in life, therefore sad boy now. How does your backstory affect you now? How will your backstory affect you in the future? Why is your character somebody that I would want to spend time with? And if the answer is you wouldn't, then I'm like, you have to really think hard before you bring that kind of character into a game like this. Remember, this is not a scripted game. A scripted narrative experience, you can bring an asshole in and make it work a lot easier because you can engineer reasons why these characters have to stay together. But in a role-playing game, engineering those reasons can be quite different and difficult. Plus, if you are playing a loner character and you are expecting everyone else to take the emotional burden of bringing your loner character in and carrying them along and tending to their fragile emotional wounds and putting up with the fact that they're an asshole, you are basically telling everybody else to put up with me. And that sucks. Why would I want to put up with you? I want to engage with you, and I want you to engage with me. So, yeah. Fuck your lone wolf characters. They do not work in role-playing games in most circumstances. This is not like a movie or a television show that you love. You cannot base your character on a lone wolf in a book, movie, video game, or whatever that has been scripted and expect it to work in a role-playing game just as well as it did elsewhere. It usually doesn't. Okay, here we go. We got some spicy heat. Spicy heat. Backstabbing, coin stealing, lying, cheating, stereotypical rogue type is the best kind of character, especially if they get to steal the paladin's MacGuffins. Yeah, this is spicy heat. This is also spicy heat that I don't agree with. And the reason why I don't agree with it is not because what you've described is something that can't work. It is because it is something that the thing that you have described is something that in almost every single one of my encounters with a player of this type, it doesn't work. You are, again, expecting everybody else to assume the emotional labor of putting up with your asshole character. Therefore, they are being asked to do something to accommodate you. And most players do not realize that this doesn't make everybody at the table have a good time. Stealing a paladin's MacGuffin can work very well if you and the fellow player that you're playing with have played for a long time together and you know that friendly rivalries between each other is great and that you can really kind of make this into a comedic bit. Totally fine. Works. But in much the same way that people say, if I put something on my character sheet, I don't want my storyteller to take it away from me for no reason. They don't want a fellow player to take it away from them either, even temporarily. It just sucks to feel like your shit's been taken away from you. And if you are also playing in a game where your goal is, I want to solve this mystery, and there's another player at the table who is doing everything they can to just be an agent of chaos, so you can't solve the mystery because you always have to be running away from whatever or undoing the damage that one of your ostensible friends have done. This sucks. I am absolutely not saying that this cannot work. I am also saying that you, the Crosshair, specifically having a design mind could probably make it work a lot easier than most. But in my experience, most people who decide to play Agents of Chaos end up just kind of making the game suck. This is also true of, stepping away from role-playing games for a second, this is true of board games, especially board games that involve any amount of social deduction, which have recently become popular. Doing random shit because you think it's funny is not a way to make the game better for everybody. It makes the game better for you because you take glee in everyone else's consternation. It is not an effective strategy to win. So in much the same way, if you were playing soccer or football, and you decided that every time the ball came to you, you were going to kick it out of bounds. Just automatically. You were never going to try to pass to anybody. Now your team would be like, why the hell are you doing this? You're just making our team feel badly. And the other team might initially be like, well, we get a whole lot of, throw-ins, so this is great for us. But it starts getting really frustrating because then you feel like you're not playing a fair game. Meanwhile, you're having fun because you're just seeing everyone else around you get kind of like throw up their hands exhausted. No good. Nah. People wouldn't put up with you. And the problem is that at a role-playing game, it is hard to just tell somebody who's sitting next to you, cut it out or leave. So again, Crosshair, you could probably pull this off, which is why this is a good hot take. But in general, see, but that's okay. So there it is. That is the qualifier that I think is important to bring up. I like playing this type at times because it's a fun challenge to play a selfish a-hole character, but play it party first without sacrificing the type. So you are putting the party and the group's enjoyment ahead of your desire to play an asshole, which means you have the right idea. But a lot of players are not. They are selfish. And in general, if I see somebody who's part of like an adventuring party mistreating the other people in their adventuring party, and the only reason why they haven't just been like, you have to leave, or even just straight up killed that fool, is because you are sitting next to them at a table and you don't necessarily want to kick someone out because it's sort of like, well, this person's my friend and I don't want to kick my friend out. That would be mean. That would be frustrating. So that's a problem. That is an issue. So we just have to be aware, because this is Crosshair logging on to 14 and doing an hour of glamour shots after we offered to run roulettes. I love it. Excellent. Excellent, excellent, excellent. And my phone falls out of my pocket. There we go. Where are you, phone? Get back there. I can barely make it out for an hour. So yes, this is a thing. So be careful. The idea of chaos, if it's chaos at the expense of other people, you're doing it wrong. And I'm talking about players, not in-game. But a lot of people don't realize that their chaos is coming at the expense of others, because we naturally pick up that burden because we want to smooth things out. We're conditioned as humans in a society to, we're living in a society. We're conditioned to try to make things work. But if you're just being an asshole, I kind of don't want to play with you. So, yeah, agents of chaos, they're typically antagonists. And if you are a player antagonist, that means that you are antagonizing other players at your table. Proceed with extreme caution. And that's what I have to say about that. Do we have any other big ol' hot takes? Because we have 12 minutes left in the stream, and I could use the hottest of takes right now to continue. I didn't expect that takes would take us through the entire topic, although we did deviate in a few different places, but that is fair. I'm also going to bring up some crosshairs. D100 is the best D. I mean, sure. The crosshair points out, Phantom Menace, being a dick 24/7 is bad, but sometimes being a bit of a dick can be fun. Yes, as long as you are being a bit of a dick to the overall benefit of the table. Attack of the Clones. There's nothing wrong in all players having the same class/build/house. There can be something wrong with that. It depends on the game that you're playing and whether you can handle that. I will also point out that some players want to be unique. They want to feel like they are different. So be careful before you take that away from them without their permission. Revenge of the Sith. As a game lead, you should not hold grudges. You need to be a bit above that, except for Steve. Fuck that guy. Yeah, grudges aren't really the sort of thing that you should have in your role-playing games. You should resolve conflicts if you can. And if you can't resolve conflicts, grudges aren't going to help. If you truly feel like you need to punish somebody at the table, punish them by not playing with them. Whether that means that you leave or they leave, that's what I would do. Solo, playing TTRPGs by yourself is underrated. I agree with this. I do believe that there are some fantastic solo role-playing games, which unfortunately I can't think of a single one off the top of my head. A Quiet Year, go play that. Although you do often play that with other people, I think you can play A Quiet Year by yourself. There's also, I think, like the 1,000-Year-Old Vampire Diary that you can play. But yeah, there are definitely tabletop role-playing games you can play by yourself, which end up being more writing exercises than anything else. But nothing wrong with writing exercises. I think that's great. Friendly in-character rivalries can be fun and make for great moments in games. Yes, this is true, because they are friendly rivalries. Also, unfriendly rivalries can be great and fun if the players want it. The reason I come down on chaos is because chaos is generally one-sided. Rogue One, playing the character wrong is up to the player. Either don't play with them or adapt, but don't force them. This is completely true. Somebody wants to do something that you don't believe is correct, it's not your fucking call. It is also why I've mentioned in the past that one of the things that I will not tolerate from audience, which frankly this almost never comes up, is I don't tolerate audience claiming that player characters should have done something that they didn't do. You don't get to make that choice. They do. They're in control of their character and they get to decide what happens. So you don't get to say, oh, they shouldn't have done that. They should have done this instead. You can say like their strategy was strange, but you can't make claims that this is what they should have done. A New Hope, a new player in a group of veterans can be good. For example, it can be a flashback to good old days to others or a reminder of teamwork in a jaded group. Yes, new players in a group of veterans can potentially be good. It depends on the kind of game that you're playing. Narrative heavy games like the games that I run tend to... One of the disadvantages to these is that it can be difficult to integrate a new player. It's a tight group. Three players is a very tight group. A fourth player who is new can feel very much out of their element. And while my players are giving and would do everything they can to accommodate this person, it can unbalance and throw off the pacing. So a new player absolutely can work. It's just not easy. And specifically for my style, it's difficult. Not all styles will feel the same way. The Empire Strikes Back. Sometimes players need to be put in their place by the game lead, even if focus is on fun. Yes, but sometimes players need to be put in their place by anyone. It doesn't have to be the game lead or the storyteller or whatever. This often falls to the storyteller because they do act in a lot of ways as a leader. And that's okay. Being a leader doesn't mean that you're better than everyone else. It's fine. So it often falls to that. But I would say that if a player needs to be put in their place and you feel they need to be put in their place, do it. Even if what you do is to talk to the storyteller or talk to your fellow players first, but like, don't put up with things if you don't want to. In fact, don't put up with things if you believe that it's important that you shouldn't. Return of the Jedi. Bad guy who is supposed to be dead coming back is boring and takes away player achievements. Not unless you set it up really well. Because you can set it up so that it works. But in general, yes. This is part of the reason why resurrection is a lame mechanic. Stakes get fucked up if there isn't that kind of situation. Now, if they think they killed somebody, but you're very obvious about like, well, there's no body, and you make it obvious that this person might have survived, that can also be really frustrating because then they're like, well, then we just fought them for nothing. You got to give them things. You have to give them rewards. But in general, yes, you need to really support the idea of somebody defeated returning properly. And if you don't, and then you just bring them back because you feel like it, it can ultimately feel very unrewarding to players. Anytime that you make a decision as a storyteller, you have to wonder, am I just invalidating a lot of what someone else at the table has done? If so, is it really a good idea? The Force Awakens. Game lead should make sure the players get to use their shiny new things, skills, spells, equipment, write it in. They should make an effort, but they don't necessarily have to make sure of it. And the reason why I say it that way is because sometimes players will decide they want to buy something that is completely inappropriate for what's going on right now. When a player buys something, it is a sign that they want to eventually use it. Not 100% of the time, but 99% of the time, it's a sign that they want to use it. However, you can't please everyone all the time. You just can't, and that includes yourself. If I have a player who's suddenly decided that they want to buy Sail 3, except they're in a landlocked country and there's no way that they're going to be going to sea in the next, 20 sessions, I can file it away in the back of my head. Oh, that person bought Sail. Maybe this person wants to be able to go sailing at one point. I can do that, but it might not be appropriate for me to shift the game to accommodate that request. In much the same way that if someone says, hey, I really want to play a game where I get to kill Darth Vader, and you're like, well, I set the game in the New Republic. Darth Vader's already dead. And the person's like, yeah, but I want to kill Darth Vader. Well, sometimes you just can't give everybody what they want. It's half right for Exalted. Sometimes you buy a charm because it's a prerequisite for the charm they actually want. Yeah, that is true. The idea behind it, though, is just pay attention to what they're buying, but you can't always accommodate everybody all the time. But you should absolutely be paying attention. The Last Jedi. If the whole party... if the whole party except one is dead, that player deserves a conclusion, even if others want to restart or change the game. Everybody deserves a conclusion. And if everybody dies except one player, or one character, then that character's story still has to find an end. Now, it is not reasonable to make everybody sit there for like 6 sessions dead and not able to participate while you close things out with that player. But that character does deserve a conclusion, and you can afford to take some time to give that conclusion. You just got to balance it with the needs of everyone else at the table. Remember that some players will take their character's death pretty hard. And finally, the Rise of Skywalker. Sometimes the game lead needs to be put in their place by the players. I would have put this at Phantom Menace because this was basically George Lucas needing to be put in his place, and no one did. Yes, remember that the storyteller is not infallible. Remember that just because you are a leader does not mean that you get to tell everybody else what to do and that you are above reproach. Sometimes players do need to make sure that their storyteller is doing things correctly for everyone. And also remember that, I like feedback because this is how I get better. Or one of the things that makes things better. I have an amazing dice tray, the Crosshair. I appreciate the thought, but like my dice tray is great. It is important that you recognize that even if you are a leader and whatever you do, like maybe you're team captain for the sports team that you're on, maybe you are first cellist among several cellists in your orchestra. Maybe you're the conductor of an orchestra. Maybe you are the team lead or whatever. That doesn't mean that you are always in charge of everyone at all times. It doesn't mean that you're better than other people. It doesn't mean that you're more valuable than other people necessarily. And it definitely doesn't mean that you are above reproach. While I have said in the past that a storyteller is important because games often cannot run without a storyteller, and it gives you certain privileges and certain responsibilities, I would make sure to point out that it is not that this person, the storyteller, does not get to do whatever the fuck they want at all times, and they definitely don't get to be immune to criticism. So, the hottest of hot takes, use your word hole. So I will remind people, this wasn't really a hot take, but I'll remind people that use your word hole is a great thing to keep in mind. It is in practice a lot more difficult to do than people can realize. Using your word hole can be difficult for me and for my players, I imagine, as well. We make an effort, we try, and it is not always easy, but we try. But remember that you have to be proactive sometimes, because sometimes people can't or won't use their word hole for reasons that you may not be able to understand or that you don't know about. And the Crosshair's final hot take saying arguable things is not bad because it can lead to stuff like the stream. Heat leads to boiling discussions. This is completely correct. Healthy debate is good. And I would also point out that anything that I say, I am not always right. And I may be right for me, but not necessarily right for you. So be sure that you take that into account whenever you are listening to me prattle or ramble on. No one's fun is more important than your safety. Just throwing it out there. That is... All right, I'll end with a very... I'll end with a hot take here. No one's fun is more important than your safety? Not necessarily. Your safety is the most important thing to you. Your safety is something that you need to prioritize. Other players should also prioritize your safety. But there are times, and this is nitpicking here, but if your safety wrecks everyone else's fun, it is possible that you need to be the one to remove yourself to both keep yourself safe and to make sure that everyone else can have fun. This is in much the same way that if you're like, I can't handle violence, but everybody else at the table wants to play a hack and slash, yeah, for your safety, you shouldn't play with them. But it is perhaps incorrect for you to say, for my safety, we should all do something different because otherwise I'm going to be in trouble, but then you are also wrecking everyone else's fun. And that's not necessarily important to do. So yes, your safety is important. Everyone else's safety is important. And it is the most important thing, but it is not always overriding of other people's considerations. Tomorrow will be an Elizabeth A. Neal stream. Punchy is back at 6 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. What game it's going to be, I'm not sure. I have some ideas and I have an inkling, but I'm not absolutely sure what it will be. But you should tune in because I think that it will be something special. It will most likely not be Mass Effect Legendary Edition because I think Liz wants to start that with Scott. So there is that as well. On Saturday at 11 a.m. will be the rewatch of Exalt Witch Academy episode 17. So if you did not get a chance to watch it live, you have the option of watching it there alongside others. Please tune in and remember that if you tune in, drop something in chat to let people know that you're there. If you wait for somebody else to say something, then no one will say anything. So, if you want that conversation to get going, make sure that people know that you're around and make comments. Give people something to comment on. There is no Drew Crew, but there might be something else that is absolutely true. I don't know if Doomed is going to happen. I kind of doubt it. But on Sunday, it is not Punchy Book Club, if I remember correctly. That has been bumped, but there is game. Exalt Witch Academy episode 18 will be at 6 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, so you can tune in for that. And that's a fun way to spend some time, I think. Maybe Status also. And yes, no Bug Club next weekend. I don't know what Status is. But at any rate. So that's it. Thank you for coming in and tossing us and peppering us with your hot takes. Super appreciated. And I will also leave you... I'll leave you with this. Oh, thank you, Rock Pants. I appreciate it there. But if at all possible, use your word hole, but as necessary, as absolutely necessary as it is, proactively find out what they can't use their word hole for. We'll see you next time.